2, 1.
All right, I want to welcome everybody to the 2022-2023 proposed school district budget hearing in the West Canada Valley Library. I'm going to take you through the budget as we do each year, take you through the different parts of the budget as required, talk to you a little bit about how this budget was put together and some of the things that we thought about as a board and as a group in here as we put this thing together for the upcoming school year. And again, some of the challenges we face as well. I want to start with a couple things. Those that are in attendance today, obviously, you're available for public questions at the end of this. If you are watching this at home, you can email Karen Sheets, our district clerk, at any time throughout the meeting. We will check this at the conclusion of it at ksheets@westcanada.org. And then after tonight, if there are further questions, you watch it later as it'll be posted. And you have further questions, you can contact me in the district office. My email's there, and so is the phone number. So a few introductions, just so everybody understands who is involved in this process. We'll start with our Board of Education that's here. Ms. Shawn Schultz, our president. Ms. Jessica Bartlett, our vice president. Mr. Roger Kemmler. Mr. Carson Marco. Ms. Janine Lynch. Mrs. Shauna Michael. And Mrs. Sarah Northup Lynch are members of the Board of Education who have helped put this together. A little introduction for our central administration. Myself, DJ Shepardson, the superintendent. Ms. Kelly Crossan is our business manager, and Mrs. Karen Sheets is our confidential secretary and district clerk for us in the district. Our building administration, who assists in putting this from the ground up together, Mr. Glenn Broadbent is our middle school, high school principal. Mrs. Green Holmes is our elementary principal, and Mr. Ed Doherty is our director of special programs and athletics in the district. So going through this, our budget themes for the 2022-2023 school year. As always, we look at where we're at in areas that we can improve upon when we put this together. Before we even start to look at actual numbers and budget numbers and what things are going to cost, what are areas obviously that we have concerns about, or areas that we're doing things that are well. So the first thing we look at is how do we maintain our current programs and the opportunities that we currently offer. You never want to go into a budget season losing things, especially things that you continue to do well and know that are important to the district. You look at efficiencies, seek efficient strategies to improve educational programs. So are we doing this in the best manner possible in carrying out these programs? Create sustainable programs with a vision for the future. So obviously we look at where we are now and where we want to be. Where do we want to be 3 years from now? Where do we want to be 5 years from now? Where do we want to be even 10 years from now at times? And then taking a look at the dollars. We want to manage the current fiscal times both in the short and long term. And we talk about that through all of our meetings. Where are we right now in the short term budgetarily? Where do we want to be long term? What are the concerns we have? And unfortunately, when you look at fiscal numbers, you always try to look at worst case scenarios. So where could we be if things don't go the way we want them to go, and try to plan that way. So the process, as I mentioned, is sort of a long process. We start before Christmas. Back in December, in our meetings is our first budget workshop. We get that foundation, and if I can even speak further than that, our administration starts even earlier than that in the fall between our principals, our transportation director, Mr. Ray, our cafeteria manager, Mrs. Butler. We basically meet with all of these people. We start to talk about where we're at right in the beginning of the school year itself. From there, we start our 5 meetings that go monthly from December through April. As I mentioned, we have the administrative meetings that begin in the early fall, and those projections are developed, and we start to look at what we can continue to sustain and what where we're having issues. Our department meetings, our principals and our departments, our grades, our subject areas, our grade levels, they all meet and talk about budget things that we need, the resources that we need, grade alignments. We look at enrollment and we monitor that throughout the year, and obviously we look at our use of BOCES services. The final step of the whole process before we take the budget to the press, or basically publicly, and to the voters, the board adopted this budget on April 18th of this year, and we'll go through that tonight and what they've reviewed prior to this hearing tonight. So the components, I say this every year, and those that listen, these are the 3 required components that are regulated by the state that we have to break our budget down into and put our finances into these categories, and just kind of review that with you each year. So the administrative portion of the budget, which we'll talk about, is our Board of Education, our superintendent, our principals, our business official, all of our district office staff and tax collectors, our BOCES administrative costs, and our capital project costs that we have on the books, any legal services, and again, down below anything, any costs related to the Board of Education. Our capital is basically the facility. That's our operations, our maintenance, our building and grounds, and any debt that's associated with anything that we do here. Our program is where most of the money lies, which is where it's supposed to be, is all in our instruction. Our K-12 instruction, our transportation of the students, our BOCES, special programs, our occupational, CTE education, our pupil personnel services, our guidance, our special education department, and all the other instructional needs like co-curricular and interscholastic sports. That's all in that program category as I go through this. So I'll start with the top, the administrative cost. The overall increase in this budget is 5.57%, or $114,662. This is going to be sort of a theme to this budget, and it's something that we start with when we do the budget. You know, what are going to be the uncontrollable costs, and what are those costs that are kind of dictated to us in terms of healthcare, retirement, and benefits, and those kinds of things. And once we're able to get those numbers, those concrete numbers, that really, you know, targets our focus of the budget, and we kind of know where we're at. So again, you're looking at all uncontrollable costs in some ways here: salaries, BOCES services, retirement contributions, and health insurance are the result of those increases. Our capital, again, in this area, salaries associated in that group, health insurance, and any sort of equipment and purchases that we need to help run this facility, that is in this portion of the budget as well. You are at 4.33%, or $149,688 on that increase. The program, which is the largest portion of this budget, is the overall increase is 3.11%, or $418,705. This is all instructional salaries. There is a decrease here in special education program costs. Some of that is associated with less numbers that we have to go out to other programs with, bringing some students back here to the district. The retirement contributions, the health insurance associated with that, and all of our BOCES programs that I mentioned early on, from CTE to special education to high needs, low needs, counseling services. All those things are funneled into this area of the budget. So that together gets us to the total expenditures. Last year the budget was $18,988,751. This year it is $19,671,986, with an increase of 3.6%. And again, for the last few years, we have really kept this budget pretty close, including last year, to trying to keep it as close to flat as we could. There's been during the pandemic, we've had the ability with some of these increases not happening. We all know with society right now and the way, you know, the economics are going, inflation and so forth, you know, some of those costs are going to catch up with it, and that's part of our long-term planning here, is, you know, taking a look at where we are now and, you know, what's our concerns later on here with the inflation. So we were able to manage this as a group and keep this as minimal as possible while maintaining our programs here. So a little historical document here to kind of give you a history of the budget. You can look back to 1819, we were at 2.2%. At 5.8% is the inclusion of a capital project back then that we talked about in 1819. You can see we were at 2.4 in 1920, 2.8. Last year we were almost flat at 0.7% with the budget, and then this year we are at 3.6%, so you can get an idea of the history of the budget over the last 5 years. So I've mentioned this as a theme, the uncontrollable costs. So special programs. We always have to plan for unknowns and the cost of those special programs, whether it be special programs outside the district, whether it be needs of special programs inside the district, and students that transfer into the district that have special needs. So we've always got to plan for not only the existing enrollment and the needs we have that we know of in planning this the year ahead of time, but we also have to take into account the possibility of increases in those areas. State employee costs. All right, we've talked about healthcare benefits, all those kinds of things being filtered into this. You know, when we get those rates from the state, those get plugged in, and those dollar amounts for our current staff that's here are just plugged in as an uncontrollable cost, depending on what our employment status is here. The retirement system costs, those come from the retirement system. Again, we wait throughout the process. They generally come in pretty late at the end, and we get those costs put into the budget. Again, something that's sort of a dictated number to us. Social Security, workers' compensation, and our hospital and medical insurance. So we have our contractual policies, we have our staff that's here, the numbers that are associated with those insurance and state numbers come in, and they're plugged into the budget, which are what we deem as uncontrollable once putting this budget together. So where does the money go? And here's the summary. I mentioned this earlier. 18% of this budget is in the capital portion, which is in the facility. 71% of it, the largest portion of it, is in our program costs, which is all of our instruction costs that are associated with that, and extracurricular and athletics. And 11% of it is in the administrative costs or the overseeing and supervising of the building itself and the students here. So our revenues, where does the money come from? So I always like to go through this each year so you get an idea of where the money comes from to pay for the budget. In terms of real property taxes, we're looking at $5,139,357. I'll talk a little bit about real property taxes in a little bit here. Other payments, $315,230. For those that watch this year after year, that money is revenue we create from the windmills that increases a little bit each year. So that's a revenue source for the district for the windmills that will last for another, approximate 10 years or so, or just under 10 years. Our interest penalties are put into there as $25,000. So interest that we have, which is not a lot. Charges for services. Things that we provide and refunds at $68,900. Use of money and property intake and rentals at $7,048. We have miscellaneous revenues, which are generally BOCES reimbursements and things like that, that come in at $154,000. Now, the largest source of revenue, as we know in West Canada Valley, is our state aid revenue. So that's what we wait on every year for that state budget to get done. See what the revenue and the foundation aid is going to be. And this year it came in $10,721,372. So that's the money that comes into our district from New York State. Our state building aid, which is associated with our projects that we have on the books from previous projects, is $1,354,084. That's the returns on our project and the coverage costs associated with prior projects. Federal reimbursements for other costs that we have associated with various federal programs is $45,000, and the allocation of fund balance, which is money that we have in the area of $1,841,995, which has been plugged in to balance this budget off. So our summary of expenditures, you can see the fund balance, to balance it off, is at 9.5%. There's 3.1% of other funds that we use for this in terms of extra revenue that we get in from other areas like the windmills. The state aid covers 61.4% of our budget, and the tax levy covers 26.1% of our budget. So I mentioned this earlier. I'll talk a little bit about tax rate and revenue. We'll talk tax rate first. The cost per 1,000 of assessed value of home and property, the projected tax rate on true value is $16.07 this year, and you'll see that is flat from last year. As a board, as a district, in discussing the budget and revenues that we have coming in right now, and where we are at financially, we feel that at this point in time, there was no need for an increase in taxes this year. So we're staying flat. That's what's proposed in the budget, with the standard increase in revenue remaining the same from that area. Now, I always talk about this, and we talk about this in public sessions. These are things we look at in both short-term and long-term. Right now, over the next few years, we're in good shape. We'll continue to monitor the financial situation of the district and the money coming in from both the state and federal areas when we look at this each year. So the tax levy is the total amount needed from the taxpayers to support the proposed budget. The amount is determined after all the other sources of revenue are projected. The tax levy for next year, as I mentioned, is projected to be $5,139,357, which is flat from last year as well. So it's the exact same number that was in our budget from last year in terms of tax revenue. So I mentioned long-term, short-term. So here's the historical tax revenue. This district has consistently remained under the tax cap, which varies from year to year. Sometimes the tax cap is flat, sometimes it's 2%, sometimes it's even higher than that. But under our circumstances and our financial situation, that really hasn't been a discussion item whether we need to exceed that. We've always decided and maintained that we're going to remain under that tax cap, and there's incentives to do so as well. But you can look back at 18-19, we were 1.9%, 19-20, 1.5, 20-21, we were at 1, and for the last 2 years, we've remained flat. So, you know, I mentioned federal sources a lot of times in our meetings for those that have listened. You know, we've been able to leverage some of that along with the foundation aid that the state is providing to kind of keep our budget on track, and we've been efficient with what we're doing here to try to limit that, knowing that over the last 3 years it's been really challenging for everybody, schools as well, but you know, our people that support us here as well. So, you know, we've taken a look at that, but you know, as I mentioned, we'll continue to look in the long term and see where we need to be in terms of revenues that come from the tax levy. So I always like to highlight what are we getting for all this, and I truly believe in all these things, and I add new things in here each year. Oops, excuse me. You know, I truly believe, you know, when we look at, you know, where do you want to send kids to school, especially in the area, you know, I'm not going to come out and say this is the place you have to send your kids, but it's a great place to send your kids, okay? You send your kids here each day. It's safe here. The academics are strong. We have small class sizes. So we do a lot of things to make this a school that I think is attractive to people in wanting their kids and generational kids to come here, you know, throughout the years. Strong academic results. We consistently have high graduation rates. Our Regents diploma rates and Regents with honors rates are extremely high for a small school. Our attendance rate is top notch. We always receive the highest score in the state on the attendance rate that you can get. Our extracurricular programs have had a great year. We consistently have, you know, strong participation in what we can offer in our extracurricular programs, and they're very successful. Our arts and music have just continued to expand. Our numbers have expanded. Our performances have expanded. Our art program has expanded. So, you know, we focus, you know, a lot of our program on that. One of the areas over the years you've heard me talk about is our college credit offerings, whether it's College Now credits or whether it's advanced placement classes. For a small school, we offer a large number of these to kids. You know, the enrollments at times may not be, you know, as high just by sheer enrollment numbers in the district, but we offer these and we have kids take them and they're successful. You know, we have a number of students this year and next year that I can tell you right now that are going to be graduating and going into college depending on where they go as sophomores. We're out offering that many college credits. We've got kids walking out of here with as much as 30 credit hours when they leave here right now, and that's without leaving this building. So, you know, that's pretty good for a small school. Online advanced placement, so things that we aren't able to offer, we have advanced. We always talk to kids that are looking to expand upon what they're doing here. We have those available. We do have kids that take us up on that. As we've talked about in the past, we continue to expand our agricultural science and business portion of our technology area. Our ag program is well attended. You know, we continue to find grants and money to fund that, and it continues to grow. Our special education program, to me, is top notch here, whether it be shared services or just our instructional availability in here and our supports that we have in the building for our special education students. We continue to keep this at a low per pupil spending rate. We are well below the state average on that at this point still. Our transportation department, top notch. We have a great 5-year bus replacement plan. You know, we're looking at almost always 100% DOT passing rate when we get our inspections. All of that's because we manage that, and the people that are over in that are mechanics, and Mr. Ray over there in transportation keep that rolling, and our kids get here safely. And this isn't the easiest place to drive buses either. Clean, safe, accessible facilities. This has been really, really important during the pandemic. We've done a lot here to try to keep things safe in here. Air systems, the cleanliness of this building, our maintenance staff is top notch here. We've done everything in my mind that we can to keep this facility looking as it does. You I always mention this too, like I can't tell you how many times just different people who don't go this direction will drive by and go, oh my God, it's kind of like stunning to drive by this once in a while, and I've never been by it. And when I go to regional things, people heading north and they just didn't realize the building and the campus is really, really beautiful. And our faculty and staff, I can't thank them enough. Our administration over the last few years especially, I keep emphasizing that. I mean, it's been crazy for everybody, but just the work they've done to keep this place rolling over the last few years. And that's a big portion of how we continue to support that in this budget. So our unknowns, our spending plan, we do these a year ahead of time, as you know. We don't know everything that's going to happen. We didn't know the pandemic was going to come. We don't know what's in front of us, but we try to prepare for that. I leave that on there, COVID-19, financial and programmatic. Right now, we continue to go in the right direction. I anticipate things next year being really normal. We're pretty normal right now, and being real normal next year, where very limited restrictions. Not that COVID-19 will go away next year, but we continue to manage that for sure. But we have to keep an eye on that as well, and the impact that may have. Federal and state revenue reduction. So right now that revenue is there. All right, they're supporting the schools greatly. I hope that continues. But we obviously have no idea 3 years from now, 5 years from now, where that federal and state revenue is going to be. School reopening requirements and mandates. I'm really optimistic for next year that we're even a step further than we are this year, but who knows? So we got to be prepared. Every time you think you're going forward, we take that little half step back. We're a little bit high with the numbers in New York State right now, where that goes and how we need to handle that, and whether they're going to require certain things when we reopen in September. We just need to be prepared. Student transfers, registrations can require staffing changes, additional program expenditures. Although I don't expect a huge influx of just straight enrollment here, as I mentioned, the needs of students who may transfer in here may require us to adjust what we're doing. There may be kids who transfer before the school year next year, during the school year next year, that require services that we don't currently have in place that we would need to adjust to. Equipment and system failure, we always put that in. There's always things that happen that you can't plan for. No different than your house, refrigerator breaks, you didn't know it was going to, you gotta buy a new one. Same kind of thing here. We have a lot of equipment and systems running this building. We've always got to be prepared for something to happen with those and be ready to keep the building open and go for this. And then the last one, I hate to even talk about the fuel costs. They're just ridiculous right now. There's no other way I can say that. So, that's been a big part of talking about where we need to put those numbers in here in the budget and the increases, and what do we need to budget for? What's the cost going to be next December, January, over winter? I don't know. I'd hope they'd be getting better, but we've got to anticipate the worst with that. So. Fuel costs, are a big deal to us here. Big thing with our fuel costs, the good thing with our fuel costs is, at least for the fuel costs for our transportation department, we still receive that high aid rate for that, and that all goes into that 90% that we talk about in return for transportation, because we are a rural school without walking here. So we still have a really high rate of return on transportation, so that helps us in that area with our buses at least. Okay, so the vote, we'll talk a little bit about that. The vote is next week. I'll talk about the dates for that. That is next Tuesday, May 17th, is our vote date from 12 to 8. Talk a little bit about what if it fails. The district's been, the people in the district have been really supportive, so fortunately we haven't had to go into this option here, but if it does, the district can put the budget back to vote as is in a modified form, or we can go directly to contingency. So if it fails, we would come back together here, take a look at our budget, and make a decision as a group here whether we want it to go back out the same, whether we want to tweak that budget, or what we want to do and get it back out to the voters again at some point in the near future. And then if after we send that back, if it's voted down again, we're required to go to contingency budget after a second failed vote. So what else is on the ballot this year? The bus purchase proposition. This is annually on our vote. The 5-year bus replacement plan. This year we have 4 new buses. We're going to replace 3 5-year-old large buses and a replacement of 1 5-year-old small bus, not to exceed $315,992. Talked a little bit about this throughout the budget process, and the 90% or 89 or 88.7% return we get on that So this program for us specifically in this district maintains our fleet. We get a high rate of return on it. It's really an effective way to manage what we've been doing. Not going to take any credit. This was here long before me. This board has put this together, and some of you were on when this got started. So it's really a great program that we have with this. So a new item that we have on there that others in the past may remember things going on or have seen other school districts is the library proposition. I just want to make reference to this just a little bit and provide some clarification. As a school district or any school district, if you have libraries that are in your district and they are looking for increases, those are required to go on the ballot at the school budget and elections, okay? And once that request is made, that's put on there for a vote, and the school district's involvement in that is just strictly the collection of that, just as we do with regular taxes. The key point is, as I look underneath here, and you have two libraries, the Middleville Free Library and the Newport Free Library that are part of this, is to be clear, this is separate from the West Canada Valley School District, okay? It's not part of our budget, we don't factor in, it's not a discussion item amongst the board members in here. It's just something that we are required to put on the ballot if the libraries request it. Okay, and that's important to know as you look at not only the district but also the budget itself. It's required to be placed on the ballot, and this year the voting is on an increase of $10,000 for each library for a total of $20,000 an increase from the original number. So that'll be another item you will be able to vote on next week. The last item you'll be able to vote on are the board elections. There are 3 board seats open and 3 3-year terms that are available for board members. We had 3 people turn in petitions for this. They are the existing open seat members, Mrs. Jessica Bartlett, Mr. Roger Kemmler, and Mrs. Sean Michael, who are currently seated at the board right now and are seeking re-election to 3-year terms for that. So our next steps is the budget vote and board election. As I mentioned, May 17th, 2022. That is from noon until 8 p.m. Noon until 8 p.m. in the lobby out front of the auditorium where it always is. In-person voting, the booths will be set up from that entire time. Questions? So at this point in time, members of the board, anybody in the audience, and anybody who's at home, I want to stop here. I gave you a lot of information, and I want to just answer any questions anybody may have regarding this budget this year. Mr. Sheets, anything? Okay. So, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody in the room. A lot of time and effort. It's amazing how fast it goes from December until now, and here we are, and then next week we're voting on this, and we're ending the school year. But again, another, I thought, really efficient process. A lot of good discussion throughout this. A lot of monitoring of fiscal money and revenues and things like that, and programs, and talking about where we can best use federal monies and so forth with this. So really good budget process. I encourage everybody to get out and vote next week. And if there's no other questions here, this will conclude our budget hearing for the 2022-2023 school year.
Welcome everybody to our regular scheduled meeting, Monday, May 9th. Can we please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we begin our regular portion of the meeting tonight, we have a special presentation. I'd like to welcome some of our parents here and some of our staff here. They're going to be talking to you a little bit about some of the new things we're doing with literacy, including the Orton Gillingham program that we're implementing in the elementary school. So I really appreciate you coming here tonight to do that. Mrs. Bray, unfortunately, was supposed to be here tonight. She is unable to be here in attendance tonight. I'm assuming Mrs. Holmes will be filling that need tonight, along with Mrs. Countryman, who will be discussing that. And we'll also have a couple of our parents here tonight who are involved in the program as well. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Holmes.
So I know everybody's heard me talk a lot about Orton Gillingham and the approach that we've been using in the elementary. I thought tonight would be a good opportunity to give you a little bit of an overview of what we've done so far and what we plan to do moving forward. So originally, there were 3 of us that went to become certified in this. It was Mrs. Countryman, Miss Bray, and myself. And during that time, we had to do 100 hours of tutoring with different students throughout the building. And now I have 5 other teachers that want to become certified. It's a very long process. It's a year-long process. And I do intend on doing a lot more with this moving forward, especially now that I have so much interest from the teachers. And I've also been getting a lot of questions from parents that have been calling me. So I thought tonight I would have them just come up. I've got Mrs. Countryman here. She did the original training with me. And I've also got Mrs. Crocker and Mrs. Main here to talk as parents. Those were the parents of 2 of the students that I tutored. So at this point, I'm going to ask Mrs. Countryman to come up and just share from the teacher's perspective what she's done so far with the training and the tutoring and how she's applied it in her classroom.
Hello. As you know, I'm Mrs. Countryman. I'd like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to be the student along with Mrs. Holmes and Miss Bray. It was a lengthy process and it was definitely worth the time. So along with tutoring after school 3 nights a week, I also work on a daily basis teaching students in kindergarten and grades 3 through 6 using the Orton Gillingham approach. Ideally, this approach is something that will work best taught with one-on-one, but we have so many students that can benefit from this program, so I'm working with students of groups of 4 mainly. Some students have IEPs, others have 504s. I use a lesson plan that I brought with me. I didn't want to make several copies, but if you guys want to take a look at it. This lesson plan is designed exclusively for that specific group. I use old material previously taught and introduce new material. This new material is continuously brought back in the lesson to support retention and retrieval of that information. There are multiple levels of these letter sounds that students can be taught. I am currently working mainly with the level 2 program. And you can see there's quite a few levels on our progress monitoring sheet. When I first started this and assessed my students, some students were able to know up to 9 of these letter chunks. And now, out of 64, there's 64 of them in just this level 2. And now I have students that are 33 and plus, working on owning those letter sounds. When I started in September, I had students that were very not receptive of what I was trying to teach them. They looked at me like I was speaking a different language, but quite honestly, they didn't believe that a few little changes in their habits, like finger spelling and tracing and blending, was going to help them be stronger readers and writers. So when I say finger spelling, what they have to do is they have to, when they're writing something, they put their fingers up and they say, so if they say the word bat, they have to go b-at. And when they're doing that, they're writing that sound for each sound that they say to spell that word. When I'm saying tracing and blending, that's typically when they are reading. So when they read, they will trace and blend that word, like tutoring, they will say oot, or ing. And they'll trace and then blend that. And typically that, I've seen so much success with this. So now I have students that share their success with me. And one of them is a 5th grader who recently said to me, Mrs. Countryman, I was at my counseling meeting after school one day, and I was asked to read something. I came to a word I didn't know, so I tried using the tracing and blending that you taught me. And guess what? I read it correctly. I completely shocked my mom and my counselor. So this same student was having her test read to her aloud while she's in the classroom, and as per her IEP. And now she has gained so much confidence that she wants to read her test to herself. She has been doing that, and she's actually been quite successful. The same student, I have a lot to say about the student because she's just a very a good success story. That same student was able to, who could not read, I started working with her like 3 years ago, could not read much of what she saw in front of her out loud to me, but also chose to be a speaker at the Christmas chorus concert, or her Christmas concert this past Christmas, in front of an audience full of people. So it's not only teaching them how to read, write, or learn how to spell, it is also giving them the confidence they need. I also have a 6th grader who, she was very reluctant for me to teach her this. She didn't think it was cool, she didn't like it, but I still stuck it in there and I still kept doing it. And one day she came back to me and she was like, hey, Mrs. Countryman, I did that tracing and blending thingy that you taught me in class today. I was like, oh yeah, how'd it go? She goes, well, I had to read it in front of my peers, and I hate doing that, but I came to some words that I didn't know, and without me asking, I just started tracing and blending, and I was able to pronounce those words, and she was like, it actually works. So it was very exciting for her and for me, and I feel like there's so many more success stories that I could share with you guys, but I feel moving forward and given the opportunity that I have, and plus we have some more teachers that are interested in this, I think that you're going to start hearing more success stories within the community, parents talking to you, and Mrs. Holmes. So thank you again, I truly appreciate it, and I think that this is something that we have well invested in. Thank you.
Yep. So the main reason that we started doing this is because we were finding that we have many, many very, very smart students that were really struggling with the decoding piece of reading. And obviously if you can't decode, it affects all aspects of your reading. And so right now I'd like to introduce just a couple of the parents. They'll be brief because we don't want to take up all of your time, but they did want to share a little bit with you from a parent's perspective how this has influenced their children. Who wants to go first? Mrs. Main, you want to go first?
My son Rowan is in 5th grade right now. When he was in 1st grade, I started having concerns because his fluency wasn't developing like I knew it should be. He was doing well on his journeys, vocabulary assessments, and phonics and comprehension. All of his grades were fine. So I felt at first like maybe I was just being a little bit, momish and paranoid. But his fluency just was not developing like it should have been. I took him for an eye exam. The doctor diagnosed him with cross dominance, but it wasn't anything enough to warrant any OT intervention at that point. I had him tutored over the summer, with a certified teacher, and it just, he still wasn't making the progress. In 2nd grade, he still lacked fluency, but again, it was still, it was not interfering with his comprehension. His vocabulary was very strong, and he didn't qualify for any intervention services. I had a second evaluation with the eye doctor. They recommended OT at that point, hoping that it would, in some way remedy the fluency issues. He couldn't read well out loud. His spelling was showing to be more, poor at that point, and his writing was slow. So, over the summer, we did, more tutoring, we read every night, and, those things just still weren't, he wasn't catching on just, with the regular instruction that he was receiving in the classroom. So then 3rd grade came along, and we had the same scenario, only the gap was growing greater. And, the fluency gap is growing, but what was becoming even more concerning is the fact that with the length of the assignments in writing, that, and, you know, he was writing so slowly, his spelling, and the gap was just continuing to grow. And so that summer, I talked to Mrs. Holmes, just, you know, asking, that was a COVID year, so we closed in March. I had spent a lot of time working with him that spring as we were home. And I talked to Mrs. Holmes, and she gave him the opportunity to be her student as she became certified in the Orton-Gillingham process. So 4th and 5th grade, he's now in, you know, almost the end of 5th grade here. He has made steady progress. His writing is still a little bit behind. I think part of it is a lack of interest in writing. It's, you know, physically he's not as interested in writing. But he has made tremendous progress, especially on his short response questions that go along with our English program, our reading program. And but the best part is, I mean, the scores are great, and that's fine, but the best part is that, you know, he has never once, as an 11-year-old boy, never once complained about going to tutoring, ever. I mean, he's come in for 2 summers, he, you know, for 2 years now, he has left the classroom to go read with the principal, never a complaint, and I think, you know, that alone speaks volumes. I think mostly because he sees the value in this. He knows his strengths, he recognizes his weaknesses, he knows that the strategies work, and he's really proud of his progress, and I think that that's super important. He needed the specific instruction and strategies that Orton-Gillingham offered. Without them, like, I knew exactly what, I mean, having taught 4th grade forever, I know exactly where he was headed. I mean, I'm familiar with the statistics. 74% of kids who are not reading at grade level at the end of 3rd grade never ever catch up. I mean, there is that window that if you don't act within it, you're out of luck. I knew that he was going to hit a wall. Eventually, the gap would have warranted, you know, RTI intervention services, but in the intermediate grades, that focuses more on comprehension, and that's his strength. So I don't see how he would have had the opportunity to catch up. But I just feel like it would have been a cycle of frustration for him and myself and every teacher and everyone who was involved. But I definitely think Orton-Gillingham is worth the investment, and I will be forever thankful that Rowan had the opportunity. So it's definitely a program worth the time.
Thank you. Yeah. And then last I have Mrs. Crocker here, and she actually brought her daughter Maddie, who would like to read a little bit of something that she wrote at the end. But Mrs. Crocker, do you want to just come up and speak for a second?
Hi everybody. So I came today just to talk about the reading transformation I saw with my daughter Maddie, thanks in large part to the Orton-Gillingham program. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Shannon Crocker. I'm a science teacher at Mohawk Valley Community College. Teaching at a community college, I often get students who aren't your average learners. They're very bright, but they don't learn in the same way that the average student does. And because our educational system is designed for that average learner, by the time I see these students, they are beat down by our system. They've learned through experience to hate school. They dread it because it makes them feel less than and not as smart as the average student, even though they are in fact very bright. They just learn differently. So when Maddie was in 2nd grade and started getting off of the bus crying and telling us that she was dumb because she couldn't read like her peers, and she started dreading anything that had to do with reading, we knew that we had to do something. Because I will not let my child learn to hate school and think less of herself because she doesn't learn like the average learner does. We were very, very fortunate that Mrs. Holmes also stepped in and started advocating for Maddie, and Maddie started the Orton-Gillingham program with Mrs. Holmes. Since then, what we have seen from Maddie in terms of reading and writing is truly transformational. Maddie loves reading. She actually told us the other night that she couldn't wait to go to bed so she could read her book. Apparently, Babysitter's Club books are still good reading. Yesterday, I heard her planning a trip with her grandmother to Barnes & Noble so she could pick out some new books. We have been so amazed at what the Orton-Gillingham program can do for children like Maddie. My only wish is that the program is available for all non-average learners like Maddie, and that our amazing teachers here at West Canada Valley are equipped with such a powerful reading and writing strategy. The equity implications of giving more of our teachers the tools they need to support these kids is huge for our district. It would mean that there will be a lot less children coming out of our district feeling that they're not smart or that they hate school because it makes them feel less than. It would mean more of our students would come out of our district with more possibilities. And I would just like to say a special thank you to Mrs. Holmes for taking Maddie through the Orton Gillingham program and for bringing that program to our district. We're truly very, very thankful. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.
You want to come up?
She's such a compliment. So this is Maddie. Maddie is extremely smart, and she just wanted to share a little something with you.
This program really helps me with my reading. It helps me learn fingerspelling, which helps me increase my grades on tests. The program makes me feel more confident in myself. Before starting the program, I hated school. I thought I was going to fail and everyone would make fun of me. But now I have tools to help me be a good reader and writer. I love reading. My favorite books are The Babysitter Club. School is so much easier for me, and now I love to. School is so much easier for me, and I love going to Siemens Countryman. I wish all kids like me could be in this program.
Great job, Maddie. And so Maddie's gone through, and as you can see, she's becoming a fluent reader, and so I was able to move her into a group setting, and she's really enjoying that this year. So thank you all for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So just a couple things. I want to thank, our parents tonight for coming in and speaking on that. To listen, that's pretty powerful, what you're saying. I want to thank our teachers, Mrs. Holmes. Whenever we talk a lot about building those foundations, but you can talk about that, but until you actually find something that's research-based that you can implement, and Mrs. Holmes really, researched this, got involved, started to explore this idea. In addition, we were looking for ways to invest some money into the learning loss that we had from the pandemic. It really focused us on what we needed to do here. And once, Mrs. Holmes gave this the seal of okay here for us, and we moved forward pretty quickly. And some of our initial students got involved with it, and obviously you heard Mrs. Holmes, we're expanding it and continuing to implement it. So it's only going to expand further for us. So we're finding some really early success. It's attributed to all the people that are involved, the parents and so forth. So it's a great program. We'll probably see them do that and implement that over in the elementary. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, administrative reports. Thank you.
Before I start on the sports, I'll hop on the train here though, and I will say that this plays into the other role that I have here at school as well. And Mrs. Owens is probably the finest educator I've ever met. What it's doing for us is it's actually decreasing the amount of referrals that we have. We're seeing less students come through special education now because they are getting this intervention earlier on. It's just been a couple of years, so I'm hoping that it's going to continue, and I'm hoping it's going to continue to lessen that burden on our teachers as they become more advanced at instructing those students. So thank you very much, Ms. Holmes. Not a lot with the athletics right now that I didn't tell you last month, but our fall schedules are nearly completed. There's just a couple outliers out there, and that's mostly just because of invitationals that we haven't seen yet. That paperwork hasn't come out, so we can't finish building those until we know which schools are going to be offering those. Boys and girls, we did say, got moved to a different division. So for boys next year, we'll be competing in Class D soccer with Poland, Hamilton, Remsen, and Old Forge. Girls soccer will be almost the identical division: Poland, Remsen, Old Forge, Oriskany, Hamilton, and that's just because there's more teams that participate in girls soccer than there is boys soccer. 8-man will continue with 8-man football. We're also moving to 8-man modified football next year to mirror our varsity schedule. And all the schools that are currently playing 8-man varsity football, with the exception of Cooperstown, are also moving to a modified schedule for next year. The 8-man football schedule has been released. That wasn't last month when that was out there, so you can go on Schedule Galaxy and look at that. We do have 3 road trips this year, 4 road trips in it, and those schedules float every year, and the modified schedule will be on there very shortly. And the deal that we came up with all those ones, just because they're gonna be a little bit longer modified trips than we're used to, like we will have to travel to Weedsport for a modified football game, but the deal is next year they will travel to us for that. So it will flip-flop each and every year, so transportation will be equal for all the different schools that we're playing. Again, we'll be hosting the Boosters Kickoff Tournament the 10th and the 11th of September. We were able to fill that tournament hour already, which is really nice because a lot of times it's tough to find schools to commit to 2 games that early in the year, but the kids do like playing in that tournament. The Boosters do a great job throwing it, so we're going to do that again. Girls Tournament, Old Ford, Sherburne, and Notre Dame. Same exact tournament as last year. The boys changed a little bit because now we're down in a different division. So some of those schools don't want to play us anymore because they see us during the regular season. Canastota, Oriskany, Frankfurt, and us. Winter alignment, last month I told you, we didn't know about that yet. I still don't know about it at this exact moment, but tomorrow morning I will be traveling to Sequoia, so we'll be able to hash that all out. So for the next meeting that I come back to you, I will know our alignment for next year, what teams will be playing, whether we'll still be in the same division that we are now with the Bailey schools, or whether they will have moved us down. Like I said, the reason they want to move us down is because they don't want to play us. It's all based off of seeding points for sectionals there. So you don't want to play a small Class D school if you're going to lose to them. So like I said, I'm going to do my best to keep us where we are because we can honor the rivalries that we've had for years, but ultimately it may move us down tomorrow. Spring sports, we are hosting the league track meet here on May 18th. And sectionals on 5/24. Both of those are huge undertakings. Couldn't do that without Mr. Sayers and Coach Hogan's undertaking on that. So those will be here. We'll dismiss elementary from the high school loop on those days. The other schools' buses, because we have anywhere from 10 to 12 on those days, will be pulling in starting at 3 o'clock so they can do their warm-ups. Track meets will start at 4, and they generally run 7:30, 8 o'clock. Those things will end because they're pretty big events. And just going back to last month, we talked about the fitness center. I do have that job up and posted right now. We are looking for staff member, parentheses S, because we don't think that somebody's gonna be able to commit to every day from 5:30 to 7:30 on days that school are in session, is what I have the position posted for now. So if you know anybody looking for it or that's interested in it, please send their information along to me. I have it posted for another month there because we got some time, and we wouldn't be looking to start that until school goes back in session in September. Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Dory, how many, not to put you on the spot, but approximately, like how many schools will be here for sectionals and league?
So I think for C2, I think it's 12 schools for sectionals, and I want to say 10 schools for the league meet. I can dig it up while
No,
I'm
that's okay.
looking
I
at
just
that.
was curious to what
Yeah.
that was.
Yeah, it's a pretty big undertaking, because some of those schools, like, I mean, when you run into, like when we host the league meet there, we go Division 1s and Division 2 there, because Division 1 and 2 run their meets differently than 3 and 4 do. So you'll get schools with really big teams. I mean, Clinton's gonna roll in here with 50-something kids at that, you know what I mean? So that's, just because it's a league meet doesn't mean it's any smaller than sectionals, just because some of the teams that come to our league meet in Center State Conference just have enormous teams like we do, 50-plus kids, so. Any other questions?
8-man football,
8-man football.
Tupper Lake.
Tupper Lake is not part of 8-man football on our schedule. You have the other, there's the other trips, which are still a little lengthy, but.
Consideration, the cost of fuel now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If it doesn't stop,
Yeah.
there may be some changes.
Yep. And that's something, I'll be prepared when you guys bring that to me. We're gonna do whatever we can
You
to
don't
keep
want
them
to hurt
playing.
the kids, but you
Yeah.
also gotta worry
Sure.
about the pocketbook too.
Yeah. So Tupper Lake's not on there. The longest trip you would see would be Weedsport, and I don't even know if we play them in the regular season because they're in the opposite division, so. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Ray?
So the last board meeting, we're only a few weeks away, so I don't really have a whole lot. Last 2 months of school are the busiest 2 months for transportation. Currently, we only have 3 days between now and the end of the school year, where we don't have any trips or sporting events going out. The school website, we redid that, added the elevation change, the square miles of the district, and the 10 district drop-offs that we go to. Staffing, we currently have 1 staff member quarantined. We still haven't received any bus driver applications. However, I did get a couple calls last week about it, but nobody stopped in to get an application. Any questions?
So we finished our math assessments. We had 97% of the kids complete those this year. So thank you to the parents for letting them participate in the state assessments this year. They did a great job. We've continued to register students for kindergarten in the fall. We're currently at 26 students that are registered. And the rest of the month has really been for planning. We're planning our summer program exact same way as last year. We'll have Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. The only difference is I'm adding pre-4th this year because those students started pre-3rd. They're going to continue the program this year. We had plenty of teachers that volunteered to work it this year, so we're in a really good place with that. And our letters will be going home to the parents tomorrow for any student that we're recommending the program for. And we'll be using the Orton Gillingham, but for math, we'll be using the Math and Movement. We've ordered lots of the mats from, her name is Susie Coombs. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with her, but what it does is it gets the kids up and moving instead of just sitting there learning math. It's really fun. It's a fun way for them to learn. So we're adding that. We're trying to add some possibility of swim lessons as a special during the summer program if we can get that up and going. And then Mrs. Main is looking into starting STEM camps for our 5th through 8th graders, and I'm working with her to develop some of those. So that's what we spent the majority of the month planning. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Bradshaw?
So we finished up our state math test last week. We have AP exams, which happened 3 days last week, and we have them tomorrow and Wednesday as well. We announced our valedictorian, Madeline Connor, salutatorian Lydia Reimer. We had 13 high honor students and 17 honor graduates this year. So they all did a great job, and we're very proud of all of them. High school band has a concert tomorrow night. And we also have the middle school band concert on the 17th and elementary band on the 19th upcoming. Our juniors and seniors went to Poland on Friday for a Safe Life tour. It was a virtual driving while distracted, either drunk or texting, so that they could see the effects that texting and the alcohol may play on driving before we have our prom, which is this Saturday. Grand March is 5:30. Prom starts at 7 at Breezes. So kids are excited about that. They're getting ready. We have an upcoming Denali group is coming. We tested our 7th and 8th graders for their strengths. The test gives them 3 of their greatest strengths, and then there's an assembly that discusses those strengths as we provide them to the Denali group. So that's something we're looking forward to also, to see how the kids like that. Besides that, we haven't had we've been busy testing. Other than that, has been much in the last few weeks since we last met. Any questions about anything?
Prom Grand March here?
Yep, it'll be here. Open, yep. Back to pre-COVID procedures for prom.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Were there any questions on the consent agenda from anyone? Okay, a motion to accept the consent agenda. Sarah first. And Shauna second. All in favor? Okay. Motion to enter executive session for appointment of personnel matters, including review and appointment of employees and contract negotiations. Janine first. the resignation of Lisa Ackley, cleaner, effective May 10th, 2022. Sarah first, Janine second, all in favor? Okay. A motion to accept the resignation of Aaron Lewis, cleaner, effective May 10th, 2022. Shauna first, Janine second, all in favor? A motion to accept the resignation of Lori Sweet, cleaner, effective May 10th, 2022. Sarah first, Shauna second, all in favor? A motion to eliminate 3 cleaner positions effective May 10th, 2022. Shauna first, Janine second, all in favor? Motion to appoint Lindsay Buckley, English 7 through 12 teacher, 4-year probationary appointment in the 10-year area of English 7 through 12, step 1 of the WCBTA bargaining agreement effective September 1st, 2022. Janine first, Sarah second, all in favor? No. A motion to appoint Lisa Ackley, custodian, step 21 of the CSEA bargaining agreement effective May 10th, 2022. Janine first, Sarah second, all in favor? No. Oh, all in favor?
Sorry.
Sorry. A motion to appoint Lori Sweet, custodian, step 3 of the CSEA bargaining agreement effective May 10th, 2022. Janine first, Shauna second, all in favor? Motion to appoint Allison Shed, non-certified substitute teacher. Oh, I'm sorry. Skipped right over. Motion to appoint Aaron Lewis, custodian, step 3 of the CSEA bargaining agreement effective May 10th, 2022. Peter first, Janine second, all in favor? Motion to appoint Allison Shed, non-certified substitute teacher, teacher assistant, monitor aide, K through 12 for the district approved rate sheet effective May 10th, 2022. Sarah first, Shauna second, all in favor? Motion to appoint Cynthia Miller, substitute food service worker for the CSEA bargaining agreement effective May 10th, 2022. Janine first, Sarah second, all in favor? Motion to appoint Pamela Greco, substitute food service worker for the CSEA bargaining agreement effective May 10th, 2022. Sarah first, Janine second, all in favor? A motion to appoint Jordan Schaefer, substitute groundskeeper for the CSEA bargaining agreement effective May 10th, 2022. Janine first, Sarah second, all in favor? Okay, moving on to the donation.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yep, it's right
A
now.
motion to accept the donation in the amount of $1,255.
Can we put in the minutes, whatever is done, the board is to see it first. Can I do that?
We'll make a note of it.
Okay.
Janine first. Sarah second, all in favor? Okay, the election inspector.
Okay, so each year, obviously, we approve our tellers for our election that's going to be held next Tuesday on May 17th. We also have to approve an election inspector who certifies the results and presents them to us for acceptance on that night. We do have 3 individuals that are willing to, after canvassing the list of election workers that we'll have that day, there are 3 individuals that are willing to stay here that night and if needed, if the board would like them to be that person. So I've given you those 3 names for that. They're all going to be working as election workers that day. This will just simply be for the inspector for that night to ensure that the election is, certified and ready to go. So that's really how that works. So looking at those 3, we basically would look at this as just nominating somebody and getting a second, asking for anybody else to nominate in a second, and then we just make a decision on that between those 3. Just so you know, I know Mrs. Sheets reached out to them to talk to them individually, and they're good with whatever. Just wanted to offer their assistance with it, if anybody wants.
Okay.
Okay, so you're just gonna ask for anybody for a motion.
Okay. So someone's gonna have to nominate.
Yeah, someone will make a nomination, just
Okay,
like we
would
did.
anyone like to make a nomination?
I'll nominate Mary Lou Flansburgh.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. All in favor?
Nope,
No.
do any other nominations?
Okay, any other nominations? No?
Okay.
No. Okay, so now I would have to make a motion
Motion to
to approve Mary Lou Flansburgh as the election inspector. Janine first, Peter second, all in favor?
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to the discussion items, and first, the BOCES capital project.
Okay, so you've received a lot of material. You've had a presentation. There's another Zoom meeting that is coming up in terms of the BOCES project. I want to talk a little bit about, again, the BOCES project, answer some of the questions that you may have at this point in time so that you can make an informed vote. So one of the things that's happened since the last meeting is the votes will be held by each of the boards on May 17th. So on the night that we accept the board elections and the budget vote, we'll also be voting as a group by ballot for the BOCES project itself. So they were here to review that scope. I also gave you more documents digitally for that. I also included the scope of work for the web complex here. I didn't copy everything because I know you have it digitally and you've seen it before and so forth. I want to just take some time to answer questions that you have at this point for our district specifically, and then if you wish to, you can take the opportunity to watch the new presentation and submit questions to BOCES as they do a second regional presentation in the next few days with that. So questions you have for me in terms of things you want to know before you're voting next week on this? As I mentioned, there's basically phases of this project, as you've seen, that will begin soon for the priority items, and it will last through, I believe, 2029 is the year that this will all conclude, through 4 different phases. The benefit, as I mentioned last month, of the municipal agreements that you received also is the financial benefits of it. And I spoke with Dr. Timms about that last week in terms of our specific district and the benefits of all these types of things. And this municipal agreement is by far the most advantageous in terms of us financing this through bond and so forth. As I mentioned, and we talked about the options last month, we will bond for this and for the payments throughout that time. And then if we decide to make cash payments, we can do that along the way throughout that. So, in terms of BOCES aid, we will receive our full aid rate for this in terms of their project. And for this to go through, every board submits one. So we would vote individually in here, but if the majority vote was yes, our board would be in favor of it. And they need all 10 boards to vote in favor of it to enter into the municipal agreements. If one of the districts votes no, then the municipal agreement's out, and they have to restructure this, and if they want to bring it back, it would need to go to a public vote. The public vote is not in any way, shape, or form advantageous. It would have to be financed just like a capital project we're doing here, and it changes the whole financial structure of it. It becomes much more costly over time in terms of interest rates and so forth, so. You know, if you're asking for advisement, you know, in terms of just the financial piece, you know, this is without question the best financial way for us to do this.
Any questions on that? A lot of questions?
No. I have a question, but I'm not asking. I do have a question. Yes, sir. The way things are going, is the 60 million going to cover it? Or are they just going to come back to us again and say, we need 25 more million?
Nope, can't do that. Just like with our project, we have a dollar amount, and I'll talk about our project tonight, and that goes along with that question you just said. They'll have to make decisions that fit within those parameters. So they'll have to prioritize just like we have to do with our project. So, no, they can't exceed this.
I've had people question me, you know, they didn't know anything about this.
Yeah.
Are they going to get out to the public, or is it our job to?
So right now, it's
I don't feel it's my job.
It's getting out to the boards and having the presentations on their websites and presenting them in forums and things like that for those that want to attend. That's basically how they advertise for this, because it's not a public vote at this stage. It'd be different if it was. Quite honestly, with the regional things like this, if it goes in public votes for us personally in this region, we don't become much of a factor in that, just by sheer population and turnout for that.
This is going to affect our budget, isn't it?
So, I'm not overly concerned with Mr. Cameron, I'll be honest with you. The way we can finance it and the reimbursements that we get for that, the initial money in the first part that we have to bond, but then after that, that aid starts coming back in, so it becomes just part of what we do with both fees and the program. So I'm not gonna say it has zero impact. Yeah, it costs money. I'm not gonna say that, but in terms of like overall impact on what we're doing here and functions of that, I don't see that at this time.
If it has to go to a public vote?
It'll be delayed. If it goes to public vote, it'll likely, if it passes, then we have to figure out a way to go through and finance this, so it's almost like we've got double capital projects going at the same time, and that's where it becomes problems. With it going through the municipal agreement, it's a group that we're just part of, and we just kind of pool together and do it. It's almost like we're funding our portion individually outside of it, is the easiest way I can explain it. Well, right now, we're just part of a 10-school agreement that we're all gonna put in for all the kids that go there, so. Any other questions from me on the BOCES project? As always, if anybody has any questions, any members have questions, feel free to contact me at any point. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it for you. And again, we'll vote on that as a board on May 17th.
Okay, the BOCES board meetings, we had a question about, so.
Yeah, so I want to discuss this with you. So the interest level with what goes on monthly at their BOCES meetings as well. We do have a representative, Janine is our representative on that. So a couple different things, and I can do basically anything you want with this. We receive obviously these things are all, meetings are open public session, but I receive the minutes and all the things that go into their minutes every month, and Mrs. Sheets does as well. So we get those all the time. We don't generally forward them to everybody, but we're gonna start doing that. So when we get the BOCES board minutes, we'll send those to you every month. If there are key items that are in that, between Ms. Lynch, who's our rep, and myself, I can have that as part of our discussion right in the beginning and add that. I can include the minutes for you in our packets, but I'm not sure if you want another copy in your packet, so I can do that as well. And we can go through each month and talk a little bit about any updates from the BOCES, if that's how we want to proceed. Everybody good with that plan? Any more than that from us with it?
Everyone good having it emailed?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mrs. Sheets, put that in your checkup. When we get that in the email, we'll forward it on to the board members. Thank you.
Okay, capital project update.
Okay, so on to our project here. So I gave you two documents. One looks like this, it's got a schedule on it with sort of a graph on it, that's up on top. And then the other one's sort of a written update with bullet points on it that looks like this. So you have two documents that are in front of you that I'm going through. We had another meeting, obviously, since our last one on May 5th. I want to talk a little bit about this. So, Mr. Kemmler asked this question. The first part of this dives right into it. So, can you just ask for more money if you need it, if things cost more? No, you can't. So the budget's the budget for the project. So what we presented to the public and the number that we presented that was approved is the number that we work under. There are a ton of unknowns with this right now. So right now, as I mentioned last month, we are in the design phase where they start to look at specific things and update the estimates. I don't even bother too much. I gave you a copy one time, but I don't bother too much with the initial estimates because they're not real until we actually put real things on paper so that we know where we're at. But what I get in these updates is some feelings and some comparison and where the price costs are and the escalations and the things like that. With that being said, as I mentioned last month, they are asking us already to start to look at some options of reducing things that we may need to pull from this if we can't do this and make those add alternates if the money comes in well. Now, the only way we're ever going to know this is after the bidding process and what the actual cost of things are. Typically, in a project, just like in your last project, if the bid and our bids came in really well for us in the last project, we had some money to work with, didn't have to worry about the scope. In fact, we were able to do some things that we wouldn't have been able to do or didn't anticipate being able to do. With this project, it's a little bit different. The lead times on things, the inflation that's going on right now, the cost of doing business right now. So, as they're doing projects now and looking ahead to our timeframes, there is some concern and some things, that we start to look at. So when we look at our project, we have very few big dollar amounts on our project, meaning single items that you can do. Obviously, we can reduce some things, but some things are what they are in terms of that. So I have 3 things on here, and then there is also one big item, or 2 big items that are not on here. So I put on here, and again, please don't put too much emphasis on the numbers I'm putting here, because these are just really just, and talking to them monthly, these are darts right now for them. This could change, it could go up, or it could, drastically change. So a couple of the 3 biggest areas that came out are the auditorium air conditioning, our pool acoustics, which are those things that hang in the pool area and the work that they would do to replace those, and the elementary school gym heating system. So you see those 3 numbers equal out, to $750,000 or so. Now, the elementary school heating system, we have, in your elementary gym, you have heating units that are hanging from the ceiling in there. Most of the heating units now, in terms of installing heating units, are roof units that bring the heat into there. So there is nothing wrong with our heating units in there. In the big picture, would you like to move those so if there was any malfunction or leak, yeah, you don't have them hanging over your elementary gym floor. But we haven't had an issue with those. In general, there are some repairs we're doing with them. But when we start to look at, okay, do we need to cut some dollars here? These are 3 areas that we can start to talk about cutting some dollars and see where the money comes out, and then they become some add alternates. Now, we're not ready to say this just yet, just so you know that, but I'm just giving you some examples. You also have an estimate in the range of 1.5 to 1.7 million in terms of elementary school air conditioning. So, what's the extent of that, and what are we looking at if we need to reduce that or whatever we need to do? So you're looking at, again, a few $100,000 in bleachers that are out there as well. Again, rough estimates, but those are your big ticket items that are on this project. The 3 that are here and the ticket items that I just mentioned verbally to you. Beyond that, you're looking at essentials and not big ticket items. It's just all the maintenance things and electrical and plumbing and things that are in there. The other big ticket item, I shouldn't say that. There's one other big ticket item, and that is your dehumidification unit. But you have to do that. That's the pool area, that's the building condition survey that's on there. It's our last item that was on the most recent one. That has to get done in the project, so that's not a negotiable. Hopefully we can get that done, in the most cost-effective way, but that's not something that's there. You also have to stay within the scope. We talked about the overall general scope of this. But the understanding is, when you do a general scope of things, you don't add things in that you didn't tell the voters that you were going to do. But the understanding is that you have a budget, and this is the general scope of the work, just like with the BOCES project and the question that was asked. We're doing this scope, but as we get closer and we get estimates and the bids come in, we then are gonna have to look, and none of that gets finalized till we know all that information. But I said last month, and I wanted to give you some examples, I'm anticipating us having to revisit the project scope and start to look at, okay, let's prioritize here, and what are things that we're going to do for sure that fit into the current budget, and what are some things in terms of the order of alternates that we want to add in if we're available to do this. Now, during this whole process, we're going to do everything we can to get everything done that you want to get done. But, you know, to not be at least starting to think about some of those things and prioritizing some things in your head, you know, those are things that we'll start to talk about and think about as those design estimates come in and become more concrete. So I've got more to talk about with this, but just any questions on the project scope and review at this point? And obviously, once we get into details, all of you will be directly involved with these decisions and where we're going to go with that. Number 2 is the project budget. Just to give you an idea, once we get the design piece done of this, you know, we're looking at SED approval happening in December of 22, so that's this December coming to this fall, or the beginning of winter, is when we would look for SED approval to take place, where we would begin the borrowing process for the project in December or January. And as I mentioned, those alternates that we're talking about and things that we have to prioritize and put in is, if we can fit them into the scope, we'll start to do those estimate reviews at that point in time as well. As we look at the design, we're looking at June 10th, which is next month, as a target date for the design completion and a more detailed estimate. So as we get into the summer, I can start to talk to you a little bit more about actual numbers that they think are going to come in terms of that. Now, they're going to talk in terms of unknowns. They don't know the escalation. They're going to be real conservative, so their estimates are going to be real high. So there's opportunity, even if it comes in too high, that we still may be able to fit some of these in. The project draft schedule, so just to give you an idea of where we are. So if you look at the draft schedule, which is the other document that I gave you, it gives you where we've been through this whole thing and takes us through the bidding phase. So as you look at this right now, the bidding for this project, we'd be starting to look at this from the December point, but being done with the bidding process in February of 2023. Because remember, this project and the construction will start in that spring of 2023 on this. And then you'll look at this, the construction phase starting in February and continuing through December of 2023, where we would hope to complete. Again, this is all pending on lead times for equipment. We're able to get these things, the bids come in how we want them to, and so forth. In conjunction with that, you can also see on the bottom where it starts the federal funds part of the project, and flip over to the other side of it, it kind of mimics the current one. So this is a unique project for you because we're leveraging federal funds for air quality, HVAC, and using that money that the federal government's providing for that use, along with the instructional pieces of it, to help fund some of these improvements in HVAC that we're here. So some of this, it doesn't cover all of it, but it covers a lot of what we're doing in terms of air quality. So we're doing this simultaneously. The good news about the federal money is once the design is there, we can start work on some of that stuff, and then we get that reimbursement back pretty quickly. So some of the federal money that we're using for instructional, we submit it, it's been coming back pretty quick for us. So that's the good news with the federal money portions of the project. So that schedule's there. You can go down through it and just get an idea of where we're at. So the SED submission target date, those of you that have been involved in projects, that's an important point. So we're looking to submit it with a target date of August 8th. So we submit our project, the scope and design. Prior to that, we'll talk a little bit about things that, you know, we may need to reduce down, and then we're hoping by December we'll have the approval. So it takes that amount of time from August to December to get that SED approval. Now, those of you who've been involved with projects and before, it's actually kind of quick. They're a lot quicker with it now. It used to be like 9 months, 10 months when we did that before they'd approve a project. Right now, we're looking at 3 or 4 months in terms of approval times for that. So submit in August, approve in December, and then the ball gets rolling with the bidding. The final cost reports, again, those familiar with this, once the project's done, once the final cost reports are submitted. So you'll see that right now the target date for our final cost reports is not till June of 2024. So once we start that project bidding in February of '23 and the work starts in '23, we have, I wouldn't say all the way till that point, but we have through 2024 to finish up this project before we have to submit the final cost reports for it, for our aid purposes. Any questions on the schedule of anything right now? Okay. Request for proposals. One of the areas that I've been talking about is the hazard materials reports. Mainly, to simplify this, we're dealing with asbestos. I mentioned last month that the initial tests came in and it was negative, but there were a few more. We weren't out of the woods yet. We're still not completely out of the woods, but the initial testing has come back and it's all negative. So we don't necessarily have asbestos. That's good news for us because part of the initial scope of this has a pretty significant amount of hazardous material removal as part of the budget. So if we don't have to spend that on that, that can be used for things that you want to get done in your project. Cooperative purchase agreements. So this is a little different too than we've done in the past. Because we have so many things that are plumbing, electrical, and mechanical, and they're equipment-based purchases, unlike the last project where it was like site work and things like that, we are exploring with our project team, Synthesis and LaChase, cooperative purchasing. So one, this helps with lead times if we group purchase things, and it also helps with group purchasing items that will become a little more cost effective for us. So cooperative purchasing is something we haven't done here, but it'll be something that our project team is going to work on to try to get this. This also is used to standardize equipment. So when you have things like HVAC and things like that where you have standardized equipment, you can standardize your bidding for that and get those. Generally, the cost of those things are a little bit less because you are involved with a standardized piece of equipment. So, for example, our train system that we have in this building, if we standardize and if we decide to do that, which we will, we'll approve that here, that we have a policy that we're standardized HVAC, and that helps with cost as well. So there's a lot of variables that go into trying to find ways to purchase items and cost save for the project. National Grid, I also mentioned, that request is in. They are going to review our project with incentives. We gave them our tax ID number. Anything that makes this place more efficient in terms of energy offers an opportunity for cost incentives from National Grid. And depending on the project, it could be $50,000 in incentives. It could be $150,000 in incentives, or 200. Those kind of numbers can play in. We do have a lot of things that we're enhancing for efficiency in this building. So. There's a possibility that we may be able to find some savings there as well. And we scheduled our next meeting for this, which is going to be June 9th. Hopefully, it's right before the date of the design completion. I'm hoping they're going to review that design completion. And then our meeting, I think, is after that, so I'll be able to talk a little bit about that with you guys in June about this. Any questions on the update on our capital project here at West Canada? All right.
Questions?
Thank you.
Discussion on the athletic contract.
Okay, so the athletic contract is an item that is signed by our athletes and our parents each year, or for each sport, I should say, that we sign into agreement and all the policies that are associated with our athletic programs. This is a document that, quite honestly, has not been reviewed in a long time. We've had to do some updates with some things along the way that are not changes, but updates just to make sure that we're up to date with all the new items that need to be included in that, and so forth, and the new requirements. But in general, we haven't done a review of that. Okay, one of the things in the process, and that's really what I wanted to talk about tonight, and provide board members with a copy of this so that they can review this for future meetings. But one of the things that, with a contract or code of conduct and things like that, the requirements for changes for that obviously require board approval and review, but also require us to have a mixed team of people that includes the athletic director, administrators, teachers, parents, these different people to look at this and so forth. It requires us to have, if we are going to make changes, a public hearing to present those changes and approval into the athletic code that we are following. So it's not something that we just change individually as a group here. We certainly are part of the process, making recommendations as a group, which is why I provided this to you, of areas that we'd like the groups to look at and some ideas you have about that. And if we decide in the groups that meet on this and look and review it, decide we want to make some adjustments and changes to this, then we present that and allow for public comment on any of the changes. And then if everything is good with it, then we are able to approve those changes and then they get the contract that's updated. So that's sort of the process. It sounds kind of extensive for the athletic contract, but it's really how the process works in order to make adjustments to those types of things. Similar to what you do when you make changes to any sort of district code of conduct and so forth.
How long have we had this?
So that, to my knowledge, and Mr. Doherty, you can correct me, have you had anything at all with reviews or anything we changed with this contract?
So when I
that you and
first
have
started
had?
doing this 7 years ago or whatever, we cleaned it up a little bit because the original version, I'm pretty sure was the contract that I had signed when I was in high school here, and it wasn't even an electronic one. Somebody had done it on a typewriter, and photocopy had gotten so rough that you could hardly even read the pages. So in an effort to update that, we typed out this new one here. And that was where, yes, so we cleaned it up just a little bit there, but that was probably 5 or 6 years ago, with very few changes to it at all, but just in an attempt to update it, so now I can actually just print it off
Some of the things
the
were even
computer.
expensive when you were in school.
So-
Yes,
so-
100%, you're correct, yes.
So as I mentioned, the cleanup piece of that is really all that's been done since Mr. Doherty and I have been here. So to answer your questions, Mike, I don't know the answer to that. The last time any sort of update, but it's been a significant amount of time since really any true updates or changes have been made to it. So that's the process. This will be on the discussion board next month. We'll discuss more in detail the contract. I wanted to give you an opportunity to have that so you could review through it and bring some thoughts and ideas to the next meeting. And we'll talk about any areas of focus that you could see changing or areas that you want to review and think about changing. We would then, at that point, if there's changes being potentially proposed or areas to look at, we would then go and get our committees ready, review some of those things, come up with some ideas. I'd bring that back to you. We'd discuss them, and if we were all in agreement over it, we basically would approve the changes, and then we would have a public hearing, or actually we'd have the public hearing, and then if everything, finished with that, then we would approve the changes. This could all be done before September, August. There's enough time to do that when I plan out that extensive progress, but we'd be looking at the changes to go into effect for the fall season if we did make changes.
Well, my question was any board members on this committee when they did this? I don't know.
Yeah, so again, I mean, the meat and potatoes of that contract goes all the way back to Bill
Yeah,
Wood and Meg Cullinan and all that stuff.
Because it does say, the West Canada Valley Central School Board of Education interscholastic athletics approval forms, which I've looked through. And it does state, I, blank, whoever they are, they have read and understand the rules of the Board of Education. So I would suggest that there's some board members on this committee.
Yeah, so at one time, Mr. Kudler, I would definitely say, you're definitely gonna be on any changes to it. In the history of it, I don't know who was on as the original board members.
I
don't know the answer. But in terms of a change now, yes.
Probably
Yes.
Gus Cook wrote this.
Board approved.
Like I said, all we did was like, when we did this at the beginning there, it was like, because when it was originally written, there were no e-cigarettes, just like you alluded to there, so that had to get added in to cover, yeah, I know. Yeah.
So, I started coaching here when Mr. Doherty was in school, and this is the exact same thing that I handed out. So, I'll concur with him that this is the exact paper that I handed out since 1998, 97, 98.
It's like 2 pages
So it's
long.
definitely before that, since it's been changed.
Yeah. I'm sure this is a Gus Cook.
It is?
Pretty close. Yeah.
Any,
Except some of the things have changed, because as I stated before,
Yeah.
you had one offense, you want to try for number 2, goodbye.
so I'm pretty sure probably when this was done too, the process that I explained to you was not required nor handled that way. It was probably, we wrote it, this is what it is, and that's the way it goes. That's not how it can get done now, so we have a little different process.
Should this kind of go along with your student code of conduct?
Yeah, so that's one of the questions I've had about this, so yes. So one of the discussion items that we could have on this is how does this coordinate with our regular district code
Kind
of
of want to be
conduct?
balanced.
So a couple different things about that. So when we sign contracts for sports, that contract is from the starting point of the sports season until the ending point of the sports season. So when we look at sports contracts and any sort of violations of that, we look at that while they're involved in the sports program, not necessarily code of conduct violations in the school system. So coordinating those with the district code of conduct, like this is my third violation this year, but maybe only one of them was when I was on sports contract, the other two I wasn't on it. Should that have an impact overall? Right now, those don't overlap together.
Well, it says right here you need to be a good citizen,
Yes,
you know, so if you're not being a good citizen in school,
catch
there
is,
there
Understood.
should be no catch.
yeah, there is a catch though, because,
There should be.
because that doesn't go into effect until it's signed and you're on a team.
Okay,
So if you weren't a good citizen in September, but you're a really good citizen in November, that's when that starts for sports purposes. So that's what I was trying to explain. Now, can you overlap the two? That's a good question. It's something I could look into to see if we look at yearly how that works, if you're not on sports contract. Because some students
I mean, they're-
might not be on contract till spring.
but I mean, like right here, you're using the term, your athlete should be an ambassador of your district,
Yeah.
but,
Correct.
I mean, so it does,
It does for sure. During the time they sign that right now.
well, they should sign it.
But don't they sign it in the beginning of the school year saying they're gonna follow the code of conduct of the school?
So as we talk, they signed the district code of conduct, yes, so that deals with our school-based decisions that we do. So if for example, if a student was in trouble with something in September, but they ran track in April, that September violation doesn't have any impact on them signing the contract in April for track. They haven't played a sport in fall or winter. Yes, they got in trouble in school in September, but that doesn't have any impact on them signing up or in terms of a violation for the athletic contract. It does have school, the second violation in school would have, just like our code of conduct, first offense, second offense in school has different penalties, this does as well. But the documents and the time you're on those are two separate. So the thing about that is, can you have a yearly, like anybody who's gonna play a sport this year sign an athletic contract, but if I'm gonna participate, blanketed over that I'm on an athletic contract all year. I don't know if that's a legal document, I'd have to look into that.
You're gonna wear the uniform, and represent your school.
Yeah, so the question would be that if you were in trouble in September, like I said, and track was in April, are you still, and you've been really, really good since then, is April still?
Not sure.
Yeah,
Something
so
about-
those are the questions, correct.
Okay, so
All
we'll
right,
talk about
yep, so
that.
review it, and we'll talk a little bit about it, and bring me your ideas and thoughts on that for next month's meeting, correct?
Okay. The senior banners.
Okay, so I believe we talked a little bit about this as a group. I want to give you some background on this, senior banners. So the senior banners and what we're speaking about today are the banners that are hung in Newport for the graduating seniors. So when, 2 years ago, when COVID struck and the schools shut down in March, and the graduation ceremonies were in jeopardy, although we had ours, the graduation, it kind of became a trend across the country to find ways to honor those graduates that year because they were missing out on so much. One of the ideas that kind of became pretty trendy was the hanging of them in the villages and towns and cities that they graduated from, recognizing them as graduates in pictures. And that was one of the things that our senior class 2 years ago said, you know what, we don't know yet if we're gonna have a graduation ceremony. We have some money available in our account. We can't use it on a lot of things. We can't go on senior trips, those kinds of things. You know, we'd like to spend it on this. Would we be able to hang things? And the people in Newport said, yes, let's hang them. Let's do it. So the following year, it was discussed with the next group. You know, again, as the groups, the students decide on the spending of the money that they raise in their class advisors that are elected and talk about these things. You know, we have advisors that talk about the importance of things like that. Last year's class decided, although they did debate what they wanted to do because they knew they were having a graduation ceremony, to spend the money on it. And generally, the cost of these banners will be anywhere, and again, inflated costs, we don't know right now, but you could be looking at anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500, depending on, you know, what you're looking at in terms of these banners. So, pretty significant amount of money for the class, and so forth. So this year, the class is going on a senior trip. We're able to do that. We're getting back to normal, as I talked about earlier. And they, you know, decided as a group they didn't really want to spend that amount of money on banners to hang in Newport. They wanted to spend it on other things. For example, Mr. Broadbent, you can jump in. They would like to have, for their trip, a coach bus rather than riding a school bus down there, which obviously has a cost associated with it. So when you start balancing costs of that, to them, it's more important to, you know, as part of their, to invest that money into their trip as a group and go from there. So right now, there is no intent to purchase those banners for Newport. However, as you know with a lot of things, and I always tell kids at the senior, you don't know how important this is. You know who knows how important this is? Your parents and your grandparents and all your family here to watch you walk across the stage and everything you accomplished. So I know, you know, the importance to them of those kinds of things versus the importance of grandma and grandpa driving through Newport and seeing their grandson or granddaughter there, you know, and what they've seen in past years is an important piece of this. So, yeah. So with that being said, you know, the next phase of that discussion is, you know, if you keep that in the seniors' hands each year, you are going to run, you know, the decision is it may happen sometimes and may not happen. If you truly want that to be consistent, just like the graduation ceremony being consistent and the things we do at graduation, then we would need to probably fund that, you know, through our own means in here, and it just becomes part of, you know, the graduation and the cost and something we do for the graduates and, as a district, and we order them, and just like we order and rent chairs and do different things for the outside ceremony and do all those kinds of things. So, yeah, so that's how I look at this. In terms of, you know, significant cost, no, especially right now because, you know, this is a community relations item that we can probably place under some money because we're trying to make these connections with, you know, school and community and so forth. So I mean, there's plenty of ways to fund what I would consider in the big picture not a lot of money. What I would say that is if we decide as a group that this is something that we want to do each year, it'll just be a number that we put in there as part of our process, and from this point forward, you know, we're kind of committed to buying them. If we want to leave it up to the senior classes, then understand that's not going to probably happen this year because they decided not to. And I wouldn't know from future years if it would, and it wouldn't be a consistent thing that would happen. And when you do that, I think that's when you start to get questions on how come last year's class got their pictures up and this year's class did not. So, the weird part about all this is that we didn't start this. It got started in another way, and it got started by the pandemic, so that's why that happened, and now we're in year 3 of that, and we're where we're at right now. So thoughts, questions, comments, anything I didn't cover on that topic? Thoughts on what you want as a group need to do moving forward?
What class, senior class, went on a senior trip on a school bus? Can you give me a class?
In the
They
last
took
2
the
years,
school
we-
bus last year.
What?
They took the school bus last year.
Where'd they go?
They went to Niagara Falls.
Well, they stayed in New York.
Yes.
That's a little different.
Niagara Falls. Yeah.
And they still should have had a charter bus,
I forgot.
because all the other classes had charter buses.
Yeah, they didn't have the money because
They didn't have the
they
money.
bought the banners ultimately.
Why did they have money? They didn't have anything, and this is what my question is, and their money's not on here, because they're gone, correct?
Last year senior, yeah, they have to expend their account, yep. They have
What
to-
did they spend their money on?
It's not about them spending their money.
It's
about
raising.
how much they raised throughout their years in
Oh,
high school from 7 to 12.
So they must have had something within
Well, in March,
the
they had
budget.
over $5,000.
No, this
That's
is last year.
Last year's class.
Huh?
I'm
Last year's
talking
class.
last year's class.
Of 23, they had over 4,000.
No, they're gone.
No, they're
It says the class of 22
That's
has
this
a
year.
balance as of January, $5,500.
I'm talking last year's group. Like,
Well,
why did they
yeah,
have
but-
money?
Where are they spending their money? That's what you're asking.
They're not raising enough.
They give out scholarships as one thing. They buy a senior gift.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
What, so
They give out some scholarships every year. Senior class does. They buy a senior gift
Who?
for the school. Generally, that's a procedure that most schools do. They, you know, give a bench, or the one year they gave us a West Canada purple tablecloth that was relatively expensive. Various things. The charter bus, things for their trips. Just different, depending on the class, there's different things. I mean, I could get you a list of what they spent.
How much does the bus cost?
I don't have that number off the top of my
It's
head.
gonna cost like in that range.
Yeah, I think it's about the same as the
Yeah,
banners.
somewhere in that 1,000.
It's a one-day deal, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a little back and forth, so it'll probably,
Maybe
Yeah.
2,400,
yeah, that much, okay.
around that.
Yeah, so
Are
they'll,
they paying for the trip?
they're paying, well, some we pay a little bit in tickets, but the activities or other things they do when they're down there, they fund some of the stuff down there. They might fund some of the cost of the food down there. There's just different things they choose to spend money on. Big cost item is the charter that they raise money for, but that's, you know, like Mr. Broadbent said, they rode a school bus to Niagara Falls last year and put the banners up. This class doesn't want to do that. They want to spend, you know, the money on that, so.
Now, for the homecoming, and this is just me curious, for the homecoming dance where we had the tent, which weren't the heaters and all that, who paid for that?
That was student council and GAA, BAA donated, I want to say they donated 600, the GAA, BAA, and student council paid for the rest. I think they actually did really well with that dance, and I think they may have kicked somebody back to GAA, BAA, but I'm not 100% sure. But that was pricey in itself too, that dance between.
Yeah, no, I was just curious how that got funded.
Did someone tell this class that they would have to take a school bus if they did the banners?
No, but the senior class always typically raises money to pay for that. Like, the school doesn't pay for their charter bus to go.
Unless I'm reading this incorrectly, as of March 31st, this class had $5,562.
Yeah.
I'll give them $2,500 for a charter school, so that's down to $3,000. What else are they, it goes to your question, what else are they spending the money on?
What else do they need to
What
spend
do
the
they
money
gotta
on?
do? What do they have to buy?
I mean, I could get you specifics. I don't
what they
have that. I
choose.
just
don't
know.
the answer either. I know that they don't have money to pay for that though. They're not. They aren't leaving money. They can't leave money in the account. So whatever their advisor.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So it's being expended out with
No,
that.
just,
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like what, because even like the 2 years ago, those classes, they had raised money since their, what, 7th, 8th grade year?
Right.
For the graduates, so even like 2 years ago, where did their money go? Because they must have had $5,000, $6,000, or maybe $4,000.
I'd have to look back for that year specifically where you
No, because
raised
they didn't
money.
have prom, they didn't have
Yeah.
class trip, they didn't
Yeah.
have anything.
I'd have to look back to
So
what
where
they
did that
spent.
money go?
Well, they didn't fundraise during COVID either. COVID
Well, they did years
fundraising.
prior.
Yeah, but
They had money in there. I mean, look
Yeah.
at your class of 27,
Yeah.
they got $1,000 already.
So I guess what I'm
23's
saying.
got 4,000.
I guess what I'm saying in general is that the money gets expended out, they vote on it as a group, and so if you leave it to that class to just expect them to pay for the banners, I don't, you know,
Well,
that's,
and it's not something that they were thinking of 5 years ago when we
Yeah.
started the deal either.
Yeah,
But I think
they-
the public is also thinking, like, if you ask the parents, I think they'd like to have it.
yes.
I think you're starting a nice trend, you know.
Well, the trend was started 2 years ago, if we were gonna pay for it, we should have paid for it then.
yeah.
So, it's a very good point,
Mhm.
2 years ago to do that. In
Well, we wanted to honor them, they couldn't do anything else.
Right.
hindsight, they had the money, they couldn't
Right.
spend it, they're the ones that came with the idea,
Well,
could we
you're
do
right.
this, and they did it, you know, and that's that class, and they're 2 years out of it. So it's a
Right.
weird situation.
We'll have to owe money.
Yeah.
I
So it's a weird situation,
know
yes.
you can't,
But,
it's being funny.
so essentially you'd be picking up the idea of 2 years ago and carrying on the tradition of it, and it becomes part of us funding it and going forward. And that's just, you know, that's just automatic, it goes there every year, we order them, part of our graduation planning, and then we do it. But,
Or what if the class is incorporated in their, part of their budget of what they have to spend, and then they just raised their goals and did more fundraising?
Mhm.
But the problem is they literally have to vote on it, and it wasn't like a 51 to 50 vote. It was like a 60-something, upper 60s to like lower 30s as far as them wanting it. It's very important to the parents, it's very
Not
important to the
important to
community,
them.
but the
Not
kids,
yet.
they just
Someday
don't
it'll be
wanna,
important to them.
they'd be like talking to your kids at home and wanting them to buy something sensible instead of a video game system. They just don't care to get the banners. I think that's the biggest obstacle, is
So-
talking them into wanting the banners.
so again, I go back to the same point I had. From class, like the next year, the class might be like, I want my picture up in Newport all summer, and they might vote yes. But it's gonna be inconsistent is where I'm going with that. So if you leave this up to the students in the class and their priorities of spending the, all the candy bar money they sold and all the different things they did from 7 through 12, they're in charge of deciding on where they, and they get options and we advise them and say, okay, you have this amount of money, so you can do this probably. You wanna have a senior trip? Do you wanna spend money? Yes. This is about where you can go. No, you can't go to Florida. You could go to Hershey Park. No, those kinds of things. And that's kind of how the advisor goes and they talk and do these kinds of things.
Right, because if they had more money, they probably would have picked a better trip or something.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna
they're
run
not
into
gonna
that.
pick these
Yeah.
no matter what.
Right, they're gonna go, right, they're gonna pick it, like, we're not doing overnights right now, nor did they have enough money necessarily to do the overnight, but as the pandemic hopefully eases, that's gonna come back again, and you're gonna have a class that's like a legit fundraiser that's gonna say, we had a neighboring school, I think, that flew down to Universal Studios last weekend,
Yeah,
so.
for the weekend.
Yeah, for the weekend, so that class decided to spend some money, I don't know how they factor in their banners, but they flew to Universal for the weekend in Florida, so, now.
The class pays for their banners in Poland.
Yeah.
I did speak to their.
That must have been a really, really good senior class fundraising group. They had a pretty good goal by the time they walked out there. So, and that's really up to them. We present the different things. We try to do as much as we can, and then it's kind of up to the kids to raise as much money as they can over the years in school here and see where they're at by the time they're seniors. But they do get to make that decision when we leave it at that. So, back to the original question. Are we okay with them making the decision and it is what it is, or are we in support of, putting this in and funding it, and I can do it as soon as now and get it done for this year, and then it'll be part of what we do here for the years to come.
What do you think?
You're setting precedents.
I personally like to see them. I think the parents would like to see them. That's just my thought.
What the parents buy?
I like them. I
How
think
much
like-
how much is each individual banner?
Any idea, Mr. Doherty, or I'll ask Mr. Doherty, you're kind of my banner guy. It's a 48-inch banner with a picture on it. What are you thinking?
So the ones we buy are a lot bigger than those.
Yep.
And those run anywhere, we do a lot of business with them, so I think we get a better deal than probably most places, so I don't wanna paint him into a corner there, but if I had to guess, probably $40 for one of those.
The ones we got for football players, those are bigger, they're like
Times.
$20.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's mid-30s for the
They
48
keep them.
inch.
But, so just for an example, Mr. Broadbent, how many of those last year banners do you have that were not picked up yet?
Approximately 20.
How many?
Approximately 20.
Yeah, so we have 20 of those banners that were not picked up by any families,
Well,
just so you know,
shame
from last year, even with contact, so. So we have, like, people came and got them once they were taken down, but there's probably 20 that weren't picked up from last year.
Was our military one delivered? We had somebody that left for the military though. Was that one delivered?
I don't know the answer to that, really.
I believe, actually we had a few military, but I believe they all got theirs.
Well, if they're military, some of them left. So
Yeah.
they should have been delivered to
Yeah,
the.
that's last, but going forward, I mean, what do we wanna do here?
I think you started it, you might as well continue it. But I haven't seen your, what I do with regard to that, yeah.
Carson wants to say something.
I don't know.
We can ask for
I
a
think
motion.
we leave it up for kids, but-
For
Okay.
senior class.
I guess we'll do that.
If there's not any other questions, we can just kinda,
Okay. So a motion to approve the purchase of the senior banners. Or should I say for this year?
yeah, for this year and moving forward.
For this year and moving
This
forward.
year, you're doing it forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
You do it, you're gonna do it forever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just telling you, if you're going to do, and I'm not gonna offer recommendations to you on this one, but I'm just telling you, if you decide, you'll just become part, you're gonna do it.
How many seniors do we have last year?
62, I think?
62, and we're at 50-something this year?
Upper 50s, yeah.
Upper
We had 20 banners left, you had a third of them didn't care, so they didn't even pick them up. Right?
Yeah. So the pay by the parent or pay by if you want one is not.
It's either all or none.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because you'd have some and then you run into the, some socioeconomic things and so forth with that, so.
Okay.
he started it, might as well finish it. I'll motion to
Okay,
go on.
Shauna
Alright.
first, Sarah second, all in favor? No. Two no's.
Oh.
You voted, you
Yes.
did yes.
I'm
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
No, I kept it up for yes, I didn't know she went to a no.
I was like, whoa.
What was it?
3, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 2.
In favor.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So I'll work on that
Back in on
tomorrow.
Full order them tomorrow.
I gotta get the
I
pictures.
still have the concern, somebody told these kids that if they did not have the money for a charter, they were riding a school bus. Somebody told that class that. Who? It isn't just something that popped up.
But my question is, this is the cost of the charter bus. We would have to take them on the school bus if they didn't want to pay for that. That's the only way they would get.
Where are they going?
But
There
it
was no,
says, rather than take a school bus, which means they must have been approached to say, you're gonna take a school bus if you don't have the money to pay for this.
Yeah, because that's option B.
I'd like to know who told them that.
Probably.
well, that wasn't the case. This is, I had them vote on this, they voted on the banners in the beginning of the school year. Before senior trip was picked or selected, they didn't know where they were going, whether they're taking a bus. It was ultimately, do you want to spend this money on these banners, or is there something else you would like to spend these money on? And they didn't want to spend their money on banners. They knew whatever money they didn't spend on the banners was just more money they could spend on their trip, whether it was a charter bus, whether it was a better trip, a farther trip. Like, there was no like banners or charter bus conversation at the beginning of the year. But the charter bus, because they didn't buy these banners, they were able to afford a charter bus and, just a better trip than they may have otherwise.
But do you ask them if they want to get a gift for the school or if they'd rather spend that on their senior trip?
So we
I'm
do.
just saying, like if that's something that they do every year, because that's what you do, why couldn't they do that and raise more money, throughout the year?
They could raise more money. I mean, they could raise, $10,000 if they wanted. It's just.
So sir, to answer your question, the gift generally is just like what's left in the account, like after they do that. So it's usually a much smaller amount than that.
Right.
It's something small. So, yeah, when we put fundraising, we start right from the beginning saying, listen, this is about long-term here with your fundraising. So this is kind of up to you over the years here. How big do you want this to be at the end and how much money you're gonna have? Some classes do, like I said, some classes will roll this and make tons of money and they'll have a whole bunch of money to do things. And then we've had classes that they've got enough to go to Great Escape in Lake George, basically. You know what I mean? So it's the class to class is always different on how much they were able to raise throughout the time.
And is there some rule about how many fundraisers a year they can have?
No, they try not to compete, like same fundraisers, like if one's selling candy bars, you don't want somebody else selling candy bars at the same time, but they can technically fundraise as much as they would like.
Okay.
So we have to control that just a little bit. So there's no actual limit necessarily.
Right,
there,
I just
but
wondered,
yeah.
like Poland, I think the reason that they do so well is they have that big soccer tournament and they all fundraise at the
They
same
do
time.
different things other than just selling candy bars.
They all have a booth. Every
Do
class
something
has a
different.
booth. They sell,
Yep.
one had a food truck, had
Wow.
desserts, one had,
Face painting,
it
all
was-
different stuff.
and they do that several different times throughout the year,
It's something our advisors can look into.
Right, it's
So
not
what do they-
just like a
what do
book
we
they
do for-
bring home to buy stuff.
What do they usually do for fundraising?
So we
That's the only
basically-
thing I ever hear is somebody selling a candy bar or
So,
Cookie dough, donuts.
So
something. Yeah, or a pie, or they didn't even do
Yeah.
that.
so we've done some
Yeah.
things, one of our classes is doing pretty well on recycling stuff, turning in donations of those cans and things like that. They've done some pickup things on the weekends of those. That's been a decent fundraiser for groups. There's a lot of different sales things that go on. I mean, candy bars make them a lot of money, so you'll see that a lot. There's a big profit on the Gertrude candy bars, so they sell those. Some of the stuff gets really expensive that they can't sell, but yeah. So having specific things like booths and things, those are things that we haven't done here in the past. They haven't
I
had
would
separate
think, I'm
things.
just out of curiosity, because I know if they're doing the soccer kickoff thing in September, the boosters is selling t-shirts, food. How did another
Poland
school?
had the boosters.
Yeah,
had
so
the
how did boosters
Yeah,
get
they-
money and
they
then
didn't
your
allow,
different classes?
They didn't allow the classes to sell food. They
Okay.
did the food, and the classes did desserts and like
Basket
foam
raffles.
fingers and that kind of thing, and just, so
Okay,
it didn't
it wasn't
compete.
competitive
Right.
within the, okay,
Yeah,
cool, creative, something to look
right,
into.
yeah, I mean,
There are things you can do and make a lot of money. I
exactly.
did it for many years. You can make a lot of money. But you gotta
Yes,
stop
they need to,
selling
but
candy.
I think they need a little push.
Right,
Kids
we
aren't
need
gonna
to
take
get
a
these
volunteer, if
ideas,
you have
yeah.
somebody, you know, they're supposed to be helping them, these advisors, well, you know what, maybe it's time they get a kick in the pants and get these kids going.
And
We
look
need
for
bigger
different
goals.
things, different,
Yeah. But candy isn't
Innovative.
the answer. Candy's
No.
not the answer.
well,
Shouldn't be
Sometimes-
allowed.
Sometimes it is.
maybe.
If you got a sweet tooth, it is.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Okay.
so we're good on that now?
Yeah.
All right, announcements?
Nope, we got one more.
Oh, I'm sorry, I checked that off already. School speed zone.
So, speaking of cost, spoke with the head of the Department of Transportation, Mr. Ray's been working with, spoke to him on the phone for quite a long time. So, essentially what I gave you in the letter is what the decision is, in terms of this. And the variables to all of this come into play, as it relates to the school hours and controlling school hours only because of things that the state has in protocols falls on us. Now, the guy talked pretty candidly with me about things he has to do and things he can't do. So, one of the questions I asked him, because it came up last month, was, okay, so we understand that we're gonna be able to put in and control blinking light on both sides, and we can reduce it to 45 miles per hour. We can control the times of that. If we have special events, we can control that. And the cost of what you're telling me is to the maintenance, the electrical maintenance of those, the clearing around it, and the scheduling of that, and the adjustments to the schedule. That's what the annual cost is for that for us. And with that being said, it becomes an enforceable 45 miles per hour during the times that we dictate, and that is the speed limit that we have. So essentially, you know, they look at it as they are granting us the request to reduce the speed limit, and they're putting us in control of it. But the part that he will tell you is the cost is not his decision. The cost is what the state does with that. So I asked him the question about, and there's probably a lot of examples of this, but I asked him a specific question, and he was pretty knowledgeable about everything that was here because he was here. The KOA campgrounds that has the reduction. So the two differences he identifies when they do this, and they have a checkoff list, is one, the walking paths that are there become part of it, and it's a transition into a 30-mile-an-hour zone in the Middleville. So they always look at places where they can reduce into a village early to slow them down and then get them to 30. That meets that requirement, and the pedestrian walking. So to his knowledge, he sees no encouraged pedestrian walking or crosswalks. We're not directly entering into a village, so we don't meet all the requirements for a speed reduction, and the distances that it is open meet the requirements on his checkoff list. However, he understands the school piece of that and the things that go on with that. So his only other way to do that, because he can't, you know, this gets put into law and so forth, you know, and written up, is he's gotta prove that, is to say it's a school zone, we're gonna put the school in front of it, they're gonna maintain it, this is the cost the state gives them for us to do that, and then we're in charge of it. And like, so if we have graduation on a Saturday, or maybe it wasn't typically blinking on a Saturday, we would call them up and say, we've got graduation ceremonies going on, we need this blinking all day, and they would do that for us. So, and it's not like it is now with the blinking. They would change out everything. It would be the blinking, but it would be an actual speed limit of 45. Right now, it just says school on it, blinking, so that you recognize you got a school coming here. But the speed limit's still 55 there, other than the corner. So, you know, so the answer is yes, we can get it reduced. They've approved the reduction, but again, going back to cost, it would be an annual cost for us that we would budget into, you know, our safety areas. Didn't bring the letter, I forgot it on my desk. Do we remember what the cost was, Mr. Ray? Was it 1,200?
It's like 1275 or something.
What was it?
It was like 1256.
Yeah, He says that's flat, that's just a flat rate, and it doesn't change, it doesn't increase. What's that?
$100 a month, 1,200 or 12,000?
1,200,
Oh.
yeah. Yep. So the question is at this point, that it is what it is, I have my answer for it, if that's something,
Coming from Newport, because they come around that curve.
He
Well,
can-
what about having like your resource officer, just randomly being out there different times of the day, can he do that?
yes and no, there's nothing enforceable, and he's not road patrol for that,
What
so
about having a trooper come over, just,
we can, but it's still 55. So but if it gets to
Oh, no,
45, if it gets to 45, now I'm in, now I'm in a ballgame just like they do in Middleville where they say, or Newport, and say it's 30 through here, we're gonna sit here. So if I go to our SRO and say, listen, it's 45, we've got it blinking during school hours and these places are flying, can you see if we can get somebody out there to clock some people out front of the school during our school hours? I now have an enforceable ticket area there. So that's the advantage of all that.
banners or speed?
I told them that my biggest concern, and it still is to this day, is the left-hand turn out of the parking lot. End of story with this. The other turns are all, the whole thing is kind of crazy, but that left-hand turn of the look to the corner toward Middleville, and then the look left, and then if a kid who's inexperienced doesn't give any second look before that, that car comes around from the Middleville side. In the other case we had, it was just motorcycles, which is a whole other ballgame. That he said motorcycles are a whole different game for me. But, they're coming, it's just quick. It's quicker than you think. So, and he agrees with me. But in the end, this is the best he can do for me. He can get it reduced, but this is how it has to be done. If we agree to it and we're going to move forward, he'll start writing it up. I said, could this be in place by September when school starts? And he said, yeah, I think I can get it pushed through. It'll get approved in Albany, and we'll get the process worked, and it'll be in place in September. It would be just the annual fee we pay them. Any questions on that? Do you want my recommendation or not? Do you want mine?
Yes.
My recommendation is, we talk about a lot of things we spend money on. I think this is an effective use of money in this case to keep it at 45 and try to keep it enforced out there so that we don't have anything. And again, he'll argue that there's some studies. I'm not gonna sit here and say nothing's going to happen just because we did this, but you did something.
Just afraid if we said no and then something happened, we would never be
I
able
don't
to.
think you can do the banners and not do that.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
It's $12.56 a month or $12.56
No,
a year?
for the year. It's an annual
For a
cost.
year.
Yeah, it's an annual. It's an annual flat cost.
We keep doing all
We're
that,
making a
we're gonna
motion
have to
for
get
this,
fundraising
or-
ourselves.
Right.
Mr.
I was
Mark,
thinking the same
I
thing.
want to stand at the soccer tournament for you. The board of
All right,
Education
good, you
stand.
do that, you
How
can
about
save me a spot.
steak sandwiches.
There
Bring your flowers down.
you go.
Do you want this motion again? And
Okay.
we'll see how it goes?
A motion to approve the reduced speed, for the school speed zone. Janine first, Sarah second, all in favor. All. Okay.
And then you would just have to send it in to them for like the soccer tournament, the football that's on Saturday, because those are
So-
like odd.
So we'll look and talk to them more about the details of how the scheduling, how far ahead they need that, and how easy that is to adjust. I don't know the details of that, but yes,
Have the troopers there and
we could schedule.
enforce that.
Now, we have to remember to.
Well, I think you gotta notify people, anybody put it in the newsletter,
Yeah.
you gotta get people educated,
Yep.
because they're not gonna know.
Yeah,
what
no,
else
there's a
goes on.
huge
They're
part of
gonna be
that.
used to that sign, and they're seeing it flashing.
Yep,
Light creeps crazy.
Late.
yep.
I got pulled over one time.
Okay. Announcements, there's a special meeting, BOCES capital project budget vote board elections, May 17th at 8:15.
Yeah, so we'll meet out there at 8:15, do our ballots, and then probably by 8:30, we'll have the election and budget results, and we'll accept those that night as well.
Okay, our next board meeting will be June 13th,
Regular time, 6 o'clock.
and we have no public. We have-
I do have a question though.
Do you have any public? Karen? No. Yes, Ms. Soldier.
End of the year activities, are they posted and sent home to anywhere on the website and sent home to the senior family?
So like national, the honors
Every-
banquet and the athletic banquets and things like that, is that what you're
And
referring to?
graduation?
Graduation, yeah. So generally, they're posted for that. We have, Mr. Broadbent, do we have other things we send home, or is it all digital? We do digital announcements. We do,
Yeah, we do a lot of digital stuff.
yeah, I mean, are you
Last year
looking
we
for
did.
like, are you looking for like a flyer with the end of your dates?
No, a senior mother put it on Facebook, she wanted to know when graduation was.
I mean, it's on the calendar on the website.
I
That's
saw it on the
scheduled. Yeah,
calendar,
it's on the
but-
thing, yeah.
And the second reason I asked it was Remsen and Adirondacks changed their graduation ceremonies last month.
Okay,
And I just had a coworker just find out her daughter's graduating on a different day,
yeah.
so she asked me.
Well, you know what I've seen on some schools' website over on the side, it'll say, coming up next month
Yep.
in Portland, and you could put it on there.
Yep. Good, I put that.
We'll utilize Parent Square as well as we get closer to June.
Can you like send something out now about graduation and the honors banquet and all that kind of stuff? I think-
Like just a letter to the seniors?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure.
We can send something out with the schedule for the end.
Yeah.
Everything's at last week, like it was last year outside, so we can send it out.
And there's
Thank
no limit to how many they can have.
Not outside,
It's
nope.
outside, right?
No, we might limit the amount of people that have chairs down
Right.
there, but
Yeah.
in terms of who can attend now, we've got unlimited space.
Okay,
Thank you.
motion to adjourn. Charlotte first, Janine second, all in favor.